Today's recording is about Sufism, Epistemology, and Niffari, one of my favorite Sufi that I would like to introduce in this discussion. So, the first, of course, question, and it comes when we just mention epistemology, is how do we know what we know? And it's a good question. How do we know what we know? And do we really need to know whatever we think we know? And is knowledge something that enhances our capabilities or not? Could it be like some thinkers and also Sufis, especially Sufis, think that sometimes like ignorance is as valuable as knowledge, since what we can know with our brain or our intellect is not always useful or fruitful or can lead us anywhere. So it is definitely a good a question to ask, because it's always like the traditional question is that how do we know what we know? And well, probably people can add to this same question, do we really need to know what we know or what we are knowing already? And that's definitely a good question too that needs to be addressed at one point or another. So let me start here with knowledge. And of course we have to, if you are coming from a tradition like mine, or any other tradition that is kind of one way or another religious, you need to add faith or belief in this game. So I'm gonna start with knowledge. As far as I'm concerned, knowledge comes to us through three ways or three means, and this is the traditional means at least. The first one is taking it from someone, learning. Either by going to school, by talking to people, by hearing, listening, I don't know, reading. It could be also another form of knowledge. So this is number one, taking it from another source. So here the source is definitely an outside source. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I mean, whether it's in a written format or in a spoken format or anything like that, but it is coming from outside. And that outside could be respected for his knowledge, for his information, something like that. Now, the second source for knowledge is logical thinking. And logical thinking, I mean, some people say, no, this doesn't happen to everybody and everyone. That's not true. Actually, we make these logical kind of decision every minute of the day, in an intersection, choosing food, restaurants, doing anything. You make that decision on a regular basis. Should I go right or left? Should I go to this Chinese restaurant or this Mexican restaurant? Should I stay home or go to work? These are all kind of rational or logical kind of conclusion that we make on a daily basis related to our activities. Or even not related even to activities, it could be related to should I fall in love with X or not? It has no action, probably. There is no action that's gonna be following, but still, it is something that you can think about. You go to bed at night, and sometimes before you sleep, you are thinking, and what should I do tomorrow? Should I go to work or not? Should I talk to my colleague about what he just said or what he said a few days ago? And really, you can make some kind of logical here, kind of conclusion and decision. And this is, as I said, this is a pattern that we use and regulates our activities and thinking on a daily basis. So this is the second source. The third source is experience. Experience is a little bit hard. First of all, experience can share the other things. So somebody can also write a book about the experience that he had and share it with you, and you think it's also your experience. Sometimes it's really your own experience, but the other option is also possible. So you read a book about this guy who experienced something that is similar to what you are going through. Let's say he lost his job and he's describing his experience after losing his job, and you read that book and you think that, boy, that's the same thing that I am going through right now after I lost my job. So an experience could be also part of the other two. It could be also a logical or something related to the intellect that we can also call an experience. Somebody say like, hey, I experienced this difficult moment in my life when I was facing two options to take. One of them is to go to the, I don't know, to the right or to the left, or vote to the right or to the left. And that experience was rough, and I was thinking about it for a long time, and it was rough. And then he describes whatever he went through and then say what conclusion he reached at the end. And you feel, when reading that experience, that you feel the same thing. Actually, it is my experience too. I was also facing that same problem, deciding between the right and the left, and when I read. So in any case, the summary of this is that experience could be either written, experienced as a logical, intellectual kind of activity, or your own experience. Now, it is when it comes to yourself, your experience is always very difficult to identify and basically frame correctly in time and space. When does experience start is also another question. When do you start experiencing something? When you say that I am going to go through an experience, but I will leave that to another topic. So now here, these are the three sources of information when we think about thinking and knowing. So I know via these three means. Taking it from an outside source, concluding through a kind of an intellectual, rational way of thinking, or experiencing you, or via a proxy that is another person who went through that experience, transferred it to you, or you read it, or you felt it the same way, and that's it, and it goes there. So these three forms of or three sources of knowledge give us access to a certain set of information. Now the other set is belief. Belief doesn't exclude those three, but it bypasses them. It does not exclude them, but bypasses them. In other words, yeah, you could have read, you can be still a scientist and use your faith to believe in God. That means you will not rely on the standard forms of source acquisition or knowledge acquisition as I described them before. You can be a scientist, an engineer. Okay, that's something. When I am building something, I will use my rational mind, but now I'm talking about something else and I have faith, or I believe in it. And here it comes trust. Trust is important. In order to have faith or to believe, you need to have trust. You need to trust that. You need to trust your guts, basically. There is no other thing about it. So as I said, this is not exclusive of the other forms. You can still have them. You can go through an experience. You can go, you can read, you can reach logical, but when you make that decision when it comes to belief, it's totally different. That's, you keep that aside and you say, and I remember myself, I used to be religious when I was a kid, and still you can think, you can use your rational mind, you can explain things, you can try to describe things, but then when it comes to God and to the other world and stuff like that, you say, okay, now let's leave the rational mind separate, or let's leave it there, and now I have faith. I have faith in my religion that it's telling me the truth, and God did this, did that, etc. So, as I said, these two forms of knowledge are not mutually exclusive. You can have both at the same time. It's to you, for you to decide which one to use for which part of your brain and for which activity and for which or what or who is concerned by this topic. And that's basically, for example, God or the afterlife. You have there, you can have a God and the afterlife and prophets and revelation and etc. And still you can be a scientifically oriented person, but when it comes to those topics, you decide, no, wait a second. This is, I'm not using my intellect or my rational mind. This one, I have faith. I believe in what was revealed to the prophet X in book Y about God, the afterlife, the prophet, the message, etc. So, again, these two forms or two sources are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist and even sometimes cooperate. You can really use your intellectual mind to justify or explain some kind of illogical, irrational activities. I mean, we have two approaches here that are a little bit, I'm not covering every possible facet of this topic, but I'm just giving two examples. We have supposedly a saying by Tertullian where he said, credo quia absurdum. I believe because it's absurd. He's a genius. I think myself, if he really said it, he's a genius. Because really, belief does not require the intellectual part of your mind. Belief is something else. So, I'm not sure if he said it or not, but if he did, he's a genius. Credo quia absurdum. And I love it. Now, on the other hand, we have a Sufi by the name of Ayn al-Qudat al-Hamadani. He wrote a book, Zubdat al-Haqaq, and for some reason, he's an amazing also Sufi with a lot of option open to him, and he is opening also option to us. But he's thought and he decided that he can prove or find evidence for afterlife, God and prophets and etc. in a very intellectual way or rational and logical way. And I still kind of go every now and then through the first part of the his book and Zubdat al-Haqaq to read about his belief or his ambition to prove the afterlife with the logical things. It doesn't really work, but he tried. Anyway, so these are two things. One of them is saying that I believe because it's absurd. The other one is saying, no, I believe because it's rational. And the problem with both of them, although I like Tertullian, if he really said what he said, I like it because it's beautiful, but both of them are really talking about two I won't say only two parts of the brain, but two parts of two sources of information. And they don't need to work together. They must not actually work together. Because when you believe, you do not use your rational brain. So don't really push it. If you want to believe, believe. Don't make it sound like you are really using your brain to believe. It's not. And if you don't want to believe, also the same thing. Don't say that it's really irrational. There is nothing rational. You cannot believe in the negative. You cannot believe that somebody is lying. You cannot. And even if you say it, even if linguistically and grammatically it's correct, logically speaking, it doesn't make any sense. Belief cannot go to your intention or to your hidden agenda, lying. You came here to lie to me about something, and then I will say, I believe you are lying. Makes no sense. There is no belief here. This is a rational conclusion that you can reach because your story doesn't hold water, it didn't make any sense, something like that. There is no belief here. You believe only in positive kind of things. Believe in things that you want or wish or hope that they exist and they are somewhere. So belief and intention are two different things. So these are the two sources, and when I say epistemology here, how do we know what we know? As I said, knowledge is through three different sources, but there is faith, which is a different source, but it's totally independent. They are not mutually exclusive, but faith and belief are totally independent from knowledge. Now, here when a Niffari comes, Sufis, of course, from the beginning, and it's not only Sufi, Gnostics in general, tried to tell us that there are other ways of receiving information, and those way, I mean, you can even go to the intuition or other things. Comes then religion and faith, and they introduce revelation. Revelation is another form of source that I didn't mention, but it didn't really make a lot of sense because for some reason you have a revelation that is only to few people, right? There are few prophets. You do have the cosmology, which you can also use to explain the situation. But cosmology or cosmologists actually were people who use it to collect oracles or prophecies, if you want, and then explain them and disseminate them. But they were not themselves the object of these oracles. They just went and collected them and disseminated them. But still, those prophecies or the oracles went to specific people for specific reasons, and that's about it. So, revelation, yes, it was kind of, we can think it's another source of knowledge somehow, and yes, it is of knowledge. Revelation never said it's really for your faith. Revelation is always supposedly for you who think, or you who understand, or you who wants to understand. This is the truth. So the revelation was not really meant to address people who had faith. No, revelation was meant to address people who has reason. And it wanted them always to use that reason to see their own truth. But regardless of this, revelation was limited to a certain number of people, prophets or something like that, or people who were close to God, etc. And it wasn't really enough. Plus, these prophets, really, we ran out of them. They died out over time. Every now and then, yes, we hear some occult or a prophet, but it's not really enough to justify this whole activity. We are 7 or 8 billion peoples. most prophets basically closes the door behind them. If Jesus is God and he came, he's not going to come up another time unless it's the end of the world. So we are screwed on that level. With Christianity, that's it, it's closed. Muhammad said he's the end, the last prophet ever. Moses was not really a prophet, he was a lawgiver. He didn't have this sense of... so we do have a small problem here with the revelation. Now came the Sufi, who really, first of all, they came up with the intuition. They came up with also other forms, especially Muslim Sufis. Muslim Sufis, I think, it's really an ocean of knowledge and beautiful kind of ways of dealing with knowledge and everything else. So we have, you can transcend yourself and join God, or you can have God descend into you. The source, the main source, the original and the final source, that is God, via Sufis became somehow accessible. And the revelation does not stop anymore with the prophet. Revelation, or something similar to revelation, you can reach it yourself too, by getting too close to God, by practicing, by doing some ritual, but you definitely can achieve that level where you merge, or there is a fusion between humans and the divine. And at that point, really, it's very difficult to tell who's talking or who's doing the talk. So if you merge your entity with God, and then we hear something, who's talking there? Is it God or you? Who dissolves into the other? Is it you who disappear and then you become part of God, or is it God who disappears into you, and when you talk you are God himself? We have few words here which is, Sufis are definitely very difficult. I mean, the word that they use, I don't know whether they meant it or not. Most of the time, like the extreme discourse of Sufis was written after them, so do we know if it's them who wrote it or somebody else, or somebody who wanted to exaggerate? But in any case, I will take it at face value just for the sake of this talk. And you have like Al-Hallaj, who is a Sufi also, and he believed, I mean, he said that ما تحت الجبة إلا الله, and there is nothing or nobody under this dress except God. So here we kind of understand that God descended into him, and the person who is under this dress is no longer Al-Hallaj but God himself. One way, Abu Zayd al-Bistami said, Subhani, oh my majesty. Subhani in Arabic means really only God can use that word. So if he uses that word, that means God descended into him. Is he God? Is something like that. We have also other kind of ways of reaching this level, but it is always kind of confusing, because we are always talking about some kind of sources of information or knowledge that is either descending or we are going to it. Now, one exception to this is a Sufi by the name of Abdul-Jabbar Niffari, who I like a lot. I don't think he really wrote what we think is his book. Anyway, it doesn't matter whether he did it or somebody else did it. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes, despite the fact that I love the guy, I find it really doesn't make any sense, but it's beautiful. And it presents us with a new level of of access to information. That level, Niffari called it al-waqfa, or the station. The station is a situation where you are face to face with God and you take from him directly his message and you enter in a conversation, direct conversation with God. And most of this book, I mean, Al-Mawaqif wal-Mukhatabat, this is the book of Abdul Jabbar Niffari. It's basically, he told me, or he asked me, what is beauty? And I said, I don't know, God. So he said, it's this or that or that. And then he said to me, if you listen to me, you will be me, etc. So it is a state where Niffari is trying to tell us that it's a level where he can enter in direct contact with God and have a direct conversation with God, and his book is basically a report about that conversation. I'm really happy because with Niffari, the connection with God stopped being a book revealed to Muhammad and ended with him. And Niffari indirectly, which is I think the 4th century, and directly said that no, the revelation didn't stop and Muhammad has nothing to do with this story. This is a new stuff that I have for you guys. So Muhammad being the last prophet, for Muslim at least, makes no sense. You regular people, you can believe it, but I'm telling you, this is not true. I met him. I met God directly. So even Muhammad didn't tell us really his direct conversation with God, how they went. They were actually very, very, very short. And we don't even know whether Muhammad met God directly or not yet. And Niffari, for some reason, wants to say that he did meet God and talk to him directly, and he is reporting to us. So I added this part because it's a new way of reporting to mankind, a new form of or a new source of knowledge. It's not about faith here. In the report that Niffari wrote, he's not asking people to believe blindly. He did not ask them to trust. He's asking them to think and hear the story. If you don't do this, I will do that, and listen to me and I will talk to you, and don't seek me somewhere else, seek me here, I'm here in front of you, etc. So there is a direct conversation between Niffari and this, what he calls a station, or this station that he wrote, where he met directly God and talked to him and conversed with him, and that also got some information that he transmitted to the rest of mankind. What is important here, as I said, is that Niffari is saying that information or knowledge didn't stop with Muhammad or with the revelation. It's an open source, actually. We can say that it's an open source. Many people, most of us, can at one point, if they follow the path that Niffari traced and drew for us, we can also reach that level. Although Niffari stopped, like when it comes to language, and here another topic that is Wittgenstein, that we can discuss it. So Niffari said briefly that the wider the horizon is, the narrower are the words. So basically, the more you dream and wish and you have ambition, the less words you have to express yourself. Words really go in an opposite side with ambitions. In other words, the more you reach to the sky, the less words you have to it. And by the time you reach the sky, you are really with no words at all. So how are we going to get a report? We should also explain that in a different way, that if a Niffari reported to us something from his encounter with God, that means he still didn't reach the final level of his journey to God, because we do understand very well that once you reach the peak, you have no words to describe it. So he definitely didn't reach the peak. Otherwise, he would not have said it. But that's so. I summarize this: knowledge and belief, and then Sufis introduced other ways of accessing knowledge and belief too. But that was for Sufi, except for a Niffari who really was about a new source of knowledge, and that is the station, where he gets in contact, direct contact